Welcome, friends. Today, we're diving into a story that's both heartwarming and inspiring. It's a tale about love, resilience, and the bonds that carry us through. That evening promised to be perfect. I was sitting on the couch in our cozy living room, enjoying the soothing sound of rain tapping on the window. The house, usually filled with noise and activity, felt strangely quiet. My younger sister Michelle had gone out for dinner with her friends, and her son Ethan had quietly slipped away, as teenagers often do. Only Sophie, our fluffy ginger cat, and I were left to enjoy this peaceful silence. I smiled as I watched Sophie sprawled on the couch, looking like royalty. She half closed her eyes as if to say, "Yes, everything is under control here." It was a rare opportunity to relax and enjoy the peace of the evening. After dinner, I decided to take a hot bath, my favorite way to unwind. The warm water and steam always seemed to wash away the stress of the day. As usual, Sophie followed me lazily, settling in the bathroom doorway with a soft meow, almost as if to approve of my plans. The tub was filling with water, and I turned the lock on the bathroom door to make sure it was secure. Sophie gave me one last curious glance, almost asking, "Why the lock? We're alone here." But after a moment, she lost interest and wandered back to the living room. I sank into the warm water, feeling it envelop every part of me. The candles flickered softly, and the only sound was the rain hitting the window. My eyes closed naturally, and I allowed myself to relax, letting my thoughts drift. But then, a strange sound interrupted the calm. It was a soft creak, as if someone had stepped quietly on the old floorboards. I tensed, listening closely. The house was old, so it often made noises, but this one felt too real. I reassured myself that it was probably just Sophie, wandering around the house like she often did when I wasn't paying attention. But then I heard something else. It wasn't just a creak this time, it was the sound of footsteps, moving cautiously toward the door. A chill ran down my spine. I told myself, "Don't be silly, it's just the old house settling." Yet, something in the air felt different, and I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. I glanced at the door where a thin line of light shone beneath it. Suddenly, a shadow passed, briefly crossing the light, then stopping. My heart raced. Then I heard faint breathing from the other side of the door, slow, deliberate breaths far too close. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding louder and more shaky than I expected. For a few seconds there was no answer, and I almost convinced myself it was all in my head. But then, a familiar voice broke the silence. "Sorry, Claire. I didn't know you were here," Ethan said hesitantly. His tone sounded strange, unlike himself. I sighed in relief, but a lingering unease stuck with me. "It's okay, Ethan. I'll be out soon," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. A moment later, I heard his footsteps retreating down the hall. The silence returned, but it no longer felt comforting. Something about that brief exchange left a strange feeling in the air. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Sophie was waiting for me, her eyes watching me closely as if sensing something had happened. I gently stroked her soft fur, trying to push the unsettling feeling aside, but a thread of unease lingered. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Sophie's claws tapping softly on the hardwood floor. The room was cold, and sunlight peeked through the curtains. Memories of the previous night lingered uncomfortably in my mind, but I tried to shake them off as I started my usual routine. When I went downstairs, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table sipping coffee. He looked tired, and there was something off about his mood. Usually, he was full of energy in the mornings, but today he was quiet and distant. "Good morning," I said cheerfully, trying to break the silence. "Morning," he replied, barely glancing up. Sophie, as always, jumped onto my lap, her soft paws resting on my legs. We sat in silence, only the ticking of the clock in the background. I tried to start a conversation, but Ethan seemed lost in thought, staring at his coffee. "Did you get back late last night?" I asked, hoping for some casual conversation. "Yeah, a little late," he answered, still avoiding my gaze. His voice seemed off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different between us. Sophie curled up on my lap, purring softly, but even her presence couldn't ease the tension in the air. Ethan abruptly stood up. "I need to work on a project for school," he muttered, then left the room. Sophie followed him, her curiosity piqued. The rest of the day dragged on, and I found myself unable to focus. My thoughts kept returning to last night's strange encounter and Ethan's behavior. Why did everything feel so awkward? Why had he acted so distant? Later, I decided to make dinner, hoping to bring some normalcy back to the day. As I was chopping vegetables, Sophie suddenly appeared and jumped onto the table, her eyes focused on the doorway. A few minutes later, Ethan entered, offering a brief smile. "Smells good," he remarked, sitting down at the table. We started eating and talking about small things, school, Michelle's plans, random topics, but the awkwardness lingered. After dinner, as I was clearing the plates, Ethan stepped closer to me. I felt my heart skip a beat as he hesitated, his voice faltering. "Claire," he started quietly, but the words didn't come. Before I could respond, he quickly retreated, embarrassed. Sophie watched him with a disapproving look, as if she sensed the tension too. The day ended, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between us. Later, as I sat in my room trying to read, I felt Sophie's soft paws tap the floor. She trotted toward the door, and I looked up, startled by her sudden movement. The door opened slowly, and Ethan appeared, looking serious but also uncertain. "Can we talk?" he asked softly, almost whispering. I nodded and set my book aside. Sophie, always the calm observer, hopped onto the bed, her tail flicking slowly. Ethan stepped inside and sat down a few feet away from me, his gaze shifting around the room, like he was searching for the right words. "I wanted to apologize for earlier," he said quietly. "I didn't mean for things to come across as strange." I tried to reassure him. "It's okay, Ethan. Sometimes these things happen. We just misunderstood each other." His shoulders slumped a bit, and he sat on the edge of the bed looking down. "I just feel like everything's different now," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Like I'm trying to find my place here, but I don't know how." I understood. It must be tough for him, especially at his age, with so many changes. I felt a wave of empathy. "Ethan," I said gently, "I get it. Things can feel confusing sometimes, but we'll get through it. We all find our way in the end." He looked up at me, and there was something different in his eyes, a mix of gratitude and hesitation. Slowly, he moved a little closer, as if seeking reassurance. "You're always so kind to me," he whispered, and for a moment I saw how deeply he was feeling everything. Then, without warning, he leaned in and gently kissed me on the cheek, a brief, almost weightless gesture filled with gratitude and emotion. It happened so fast. I pulled back, a little startled, but I smiled at him, reassuring him, "Let's just keep being ourselves. Sometimes that's enough." He nodded, his expression softening. He stood up and quietly left the room, saying, "Thank you, Claire." When the door closed behind him, the tension in the room started to lift, and Sophie purred softly, as if everything was okay again. But deep down, I knew this moment would linger in our story, no matter how small it seemed.